you're editing, you're sort of shaping the film. You're controlling time and space in a way. You're dealing with time. And you're also dramatically dealing with pacing, information as far as what the audience either wants to see or what they should see. Originally, it was a big deal for me. It was a movie in Pittsburgh because I'd watched them when they showed up on Chiller Theater, talking to Chilly Billy, and I went to see it. And not only, I mean, it was a real movie, and it was a really good movie too. So it was a really big deal. And to know they were going to that the original creators were going to remake it, it's like I got to do something on it. I heard about the project. There were some ads in Variety, and then I was shooting behind the scenes for Two Evil Eyes, interviewing cast and crew, and one interview was Tom Savini, and he mentioned he was going to direct that. It was going to happen after Two Evil Eyes was done, but then after the shooting was over, I didn't hear much more about it. But then I must have been sometime in the spring. I met Nick Mastandrea, and he says, "Oh, we should lunch. We should have lunch. We should talk." And then after that, I got a call from Tom to meet with him at their offices above the Oyster House in Market Square. And he had all his storyboards and all the walls around it and said, "Here's the movie." You know, we talked about it, and he said, he says, "As far as I'm concerned, you could edit." He says, "But George has creative control." So it was final say was with George. So he said, if George says it's okay, then you're it. George always thought of the project as like a Western Pennsylvania thing. It had his roots and feeling here. So he wanted to keep as many local, talented people as possible. And then I got a call one day. He says, "Well, you're the editor. Come over and sign the papers and everything." And then that was it. It was never on the set, never in production at all. So what I saw was basically what was on film. So I had a floor plan of the house and all this other stuff, but I just watched the footage. So I knew what the footage had, and that way I know what the audience will see. So I just left it at that. I never watched the original, before that. I did watch some films that George cut, because my approach was, well, how would George look at this footage? How would he deal with it? And try and kind of see the way he deals with things and try and emulate that. So I, again, just reacted to the material as it came. I mean, I knew the basic story and everything. I'd read the script. But it was basically how the actors portrayed it and how Tom had staged things, and I just reacted to that. So I wasn't really keeping the original in mind at all. We shot it pretty much in sequence, which really helped, because I'm sure it helped the actors, but also helped all of us to see as the film is taking shape, and you get a sense of pacing and timing and everything. George was around the first few days of shooting, but then he went away for 2 weeks to write the screenplay for The Dark Half. And so the first couple Sundays of shooting, Tom and I would go to the editing room on Sunday afternoon, and I would show him what I edited, and we'd look at that and other takes and talk about that and make some changes. And then at the end, he had this tiny little tripod, this tiny little video camera, and I would play the scenes and he would videotape them. And what I heard was he'd show them to people on the crew during the week. And he did it for the first couple weeks, but then when George was finished with the Dark Half script and sent it off to Orion, then George took all the tapes of the dailies that he had missed and reviewed them, and then he sat with me for a day and watched what I had cut together and talked through things and changes and stuff and things he saw in dailies, another take that he saw or a piece of another take or something, and we made changes there. Some of the scenes that were challenging in the editing room, the opening scenes in the cemetery with the fighting with the zombies and everything, there were some shots I wasn't sure exactly how they lead to the next shot, like exactly where to get it. And that's where George helped me a little bit. He said, "Well, I saw something here in this other take, or something here in another take." Also the boarding up sequence, where everyone's boarding stuff up and getting everything done. I was trying to balance that and get that so you understand what's going on while all the other stuff is going on. The other thing, not necessarily a scene, but when I put together the whole show and we screened it for some people, I had left out the wide zombie shots. because they shot them at different times, usually on a weekend, and they had different numbers of zombies depending on what it was. And so I wanted to make sure I got the progression right. So I cut everything and I just put scene missing in where there would be zombie shots. And I had to give a little speech saying, well, when you see that, there's zombie shots. I just want to make sure that I get the progression of it growing and not, mess it up or anything. So then I just spent a day just getting that right, saying, okay, here's 2, here's 5, or 7, and make sure that it builds. So at the end, it's they're all over the place. One thing that was interesting was at the end, the very end. I don't know if it was the last day or next to last day of shooting. They shot the end when Ben comes up out of the basement, and the 2 yokels shoot him. And we're watching the dailies, and George said, now the plan is when he gets up to the top, he gets shot. He says, but we shot a look of Ben looking at Barbara just to have it. But he said the plan is he comes in, they shoot him, and that's it. Which I guess makes sense, because in the original, Ben shows up and Vince shoots him, and that's it. So I cut it that way. And we had that first screening. That's the one without the zombie shots. And as soon as it was over, George and I looked at each other and said, no, we need the look. So we went back and put the look in there. And then after, we did another screening with temp music and temp effects. And George said, gee, Barbara doesn't look as cold and heartless. What was it? And we said, what's different? What's different? And then George realized it was the look that made the difference. Couple things we had to reshoot. There was a zombie at the window. It was a woman in a bathrobe. The zombie comes to the window. After Magruder gets shot, the zombie comes in the window, and it was a woman in a bathrobe. But the squibs just didn't read because of the placement. One was like on her side, it was like the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and the bathrobe, they didn't come up that well. So we reshot it with it's the bald zombie and the bare-chested zombie.
Is he dead? No! Is he dead? You're all seeing this. Is he dead? Stop it!
George loved to edit music, so he said, would you mind if I edit the temp music? It's like, by all means. And he was in his red licorice days, so he'd be eating red licorice and cutting music and stuff. And because he bought some soundtracks, CD soundtracks, and had them transferred, some John Carpenter stuff. He always thought the music should be textures, nothing specific, just texture type sounds. George had gotten some demos for some people, Paul, and there was somebody else, there were 2 guys who did some music, which he liked, but I remember saying, man, I really dig what Paul did the best of all of them. And so that was recorded here in Pittsburgh, and Russ Streiner worked a lot with that at the recording studio where they did that. I did talk to him once or twice because he was working on one of the later reels. It was the big action scene after the pumps explode and Ben's running back and all the zombies and everything. And Paul's saying, I'm trying to think what kind of music you put there. I said, well, it should be big action music, And he said, well, I'm thinking more jazz. And I said, no, I don't think jazz is really going to work there, I don't think it's the right feel. It needs to be heavy, dramatic, action type movie stuff. And we get we get the tape, they transfer, we lay it in, so the mixers and the sound editor are playing the tracks, and we hear this jazz coming in. And we're like, oh, this doesn't really work. So we kept it really low, because there's enough noise and stuff going on anyway, so we just kind of kept it in the background. You don't really hear that much of it. The other thing was the sound editor had these things he has, I don't know how or when he recorded them, but he said, I have these things called saw tones. It says you can use to put in wherever. And the one place we thought we needed was when Ben is sitting in front of the fireplace, telling a story or what he saw at Beekman's Diner and all that kind of stuff. And he said, we need something there. So I had the sawtones and I laid them in more or less as punctuation. Like he'll say something dramatic, I would use that in there. That's as Barbara's, changing in the background.
Some of those things made it inside the diner. Started coming after us. Some good old boy comes chasing them. Mean son of a bitch got some kind of hot shit gun, like an M16 or something. He starts shooting wild.
They had a wrap party, and they said, oh, we're going to have the crew photo at 1 o'clock. And I said, well, we can't because we're getting filmed. The last batch of film was coming in at 1 o'clock. They had the assistants had to, go sync it up and everything. And I thought I'd review it and then go to the wrap party just to let everybody know that everything was okay. And that's when Frank Prinzi got the moonshot right. They had tried like 4 or 5 tries, and the last try was the moonshot that opens the film. And I told Frank, you got it. It was perfect. Because the other ones either it was overexposed, it was just a white ball, because the moon is brighter than you think. Other times they had it in front of trees, but the trees, it was time lapse, but the wind would blow, so the trees would jerk really funny. Another time they tracked it and it didn't go up as high as they thought it could, so they kept trying every once in a while, and they nailed it on the last one, and I told Frank about that. When we started, pre-production and even beginning of production, we always knew it was a 21st century release. And it wasn't until like a week or two after that, George had talked to 21st over the phone, and he came in the office saying, oh, they said Columbia might be interested in it.
Heads up!
We had a screening with 21st Century, Menachem Golan, and Mark Fisher, who was head of production, and I think Bill Weiner, who was legal. I remember Menachem sat in front of me. When the movie is over, he turned back and looked at George, who was on my left. He goes, George, it's a wonderful picture. And while we were there dealing with that, they got a call at 21st. An opening came up at the MPAA. There was a movie was going to be scheduled, and they canceled it. So quick, put this Columbia logo at the head of the print, and we're going to get it to the MPAA so they can look at it and see what rating we get. What the MPAA said was, you understand it's a serious film. We understand, you have to kill the ghoul killing the brain, kill the ghoul. They said, so we know we have to shoot him in the head, but we don't like head blows with splashes. So we went through and tried to eliminate, the head blows with squibs, where you could see the squibs. The other thing they didn't like was the poker in Uncle Regis' head, which we squinted out, which I left. When George first saw it, he said, they're never going to let you do that. And I had read an interview with Wes Craven and how he said he would leave things in there to negotiate, to bargain. It's like, well, I'll cut this if you let me have that. So I said, well, maybe we can do that. So we let it in there, but that had to go out. The thing I hated to see leave was there was a huge head blow when Tom and Judy Rose are in the truck to go up to get the gas pump, and a zombie comes up, and Tom has the shotgun, and he just shoots him, and the head just blows. And we thought, well, if they don't like head blows with splashes, chances are they're not going to like a head blow completely. But I have to tell you, when we had that screening at Columbia, George had asked, can we invite friends? And so George made some calls, and Pat Buba and John Harrison, some others were there. And the movie's going along, and I tell you, that head blow was the right effect at just the right moment. People went, whoa! And it really played well, and I hated to see it go, but that had to go as well. And so we made those changes, sent the print back to MPAA to review it again. And meanwhile, 21st Century was nervous. Says, you got to get an R. You got to get an R this time, because we had to get it delivered to Columbia by the 22nd of September, so they could release it in October. And 21st Century needed the money so they could pay for their next Navy SEALs movie that was coming up with Rob Lowe. So we sent it to them, and then we got the R, and then that was it. the other things that George brought up with the suits. He says, well, we're not exactly 90 minutes. Because we didn't know how long it was going to be, because we didn't have the end credits figured out yet. I mean, it was going to be 80-something, but we weren't sure it would make 90. He said, as long as it isn't shorter than 86. He said, well, we'll make that. So they were okay with that, too. Of course, the other thing was we had to do 95-minute version for TV. And when I was in LA, I was working on the TV version, which is mainly language, TV cover lines and stuff. And I cut that in, we had to do another mix. And the woman at Columbia TriStar TV said, well, don't you have any deleted scenes or anything? I said, no, not really. I said, we trimmed, a few seconds off of the ends of things here and there, but it's nothing that's going to get you to 95. I mean, it was pretty lean. I mean, there were no extraneous scenes or nothing going on or anything like that.
Came back. You came back.
It's another one for the fire.
Reviews were mixed. Some were favorable. There were no raves from the major critics. I mean, some were favorable, some were not. I liked the one in New York Times, which was favorable because they mentioned my swift, clean editing. So I thought, gee, I got my name in the New York Times, so that was pretty good. But yeah, it just kind of opened and closed, and that was that. And I thought maybe this would be the beginning of a great, editing career, but I ended back, shooting and cutting industrials and training films and stuff like that. So it's the story of Hollywood, your ups and your downs. But it did play on cable a lot. And eventually, people started talking about it, and there's a fan base for it. So, people seem to like it.
They're so slow. We could just walk right past them. We wouldn't even have to run. We could just walk right past them.
Seems it's more popular now than when it first came out, and I don't know if it's just because of the popularity of zombies and Living Dead being more popular. They're bigger fans. There are more and more fans of that sort of movie and that sort of thing. But it's nice that they, after all these years, people are recognizing it and seeing it, taking it for what it is, and not trying to compare. It's not just, well, it's a decent remake of, it's one of the better remakes of movies. Yeah, it is a remake, but, George was trying different things in the script. More of the interaction with the people. His idea wasn't so much the zombies as, the fact that people are arguing and not dealing with the problem. It was always not dealing with the problem. Deal with the problem, whereas, they're just fighting among themselves. I always thought if the movie had been successful, you could have continued a line on that, like she and these other ones would just go from town to town, going and searching for other zombies. You could do a whole other line of stories that way, sequels that way. But, kind of what they did with The Walking Dead. But I thought, well, but, the movie came and went, and that was that. And, came on a home video and DVD, and played cable. I used to see it played cable a lot. And maybe it's just one of those movies where it just took a while for people to kind of look at it and notice it.